Hello world, Ryan from the West here, and today we are combining two of my favorite video games. Obviously Pokemon and Stardew Valley. Now, if you aren't too sure on what Stardew Valley is, it's an indie game where you play as a farmer, inheriting your grandpa's farm, and moving to the small region of Stardew Valley, meeting and forming relationships with the locals, mining, foraging, fishing, and turning the rundown farm into a profitable business. And while you do this, there are over 30 different NPCs that live in the neighboring Pelican town and its surrounds, 12 of which you can romance and marry, and others who are just helpful and friendly neighbors going about their business. Now, for the reason you're here, where does Pokemon fit into this? Well, while I played for a few months to get perfection, which is 100% completing the game, I kept having flashes in my mind of giving each of these 30 or so villagers their Pokemon teams. But this video won't be for every villager in Stardew Valley. When I started writing my ideas down and decided to make this video, I originally was going to only include an Elite Four and a Champion, as a way to keep this relatively short. But with over 30 villagers and so much to do in the game, I couldn't limit this video to reducing the entirety of Stardew Valley to only 5 Pokemon teams. I didn't even stop at just teams. This video will be what if Stardew Valley, the entire game, was a Pokemon game. So what would you do in this Stardew Valley Pokemon game? Well, I think a good story would be that you've just moved to Stardew Valley to restore your grandpa's farm to its former glory, just as the citizens of Stardew Valley have started their own Pokemon League. I love the change of pace that Pokemon Sun and Moon had with Alola setting up their Pokemon League for the first time, and I feel like something similar could happen here. Maybe a bit further into the process, where Stardew Valley now has gym leaders and a proper Elite Four, but maybe just not the infrastructure of 8 different cities. I mean, Legend ZA proved you can do a full main series Pokemon game that is geographically limited to a small area, so I think some creative decisions and design could still allow for a fun game in such a relatively small region like Stardew Valley. But that's where the villainous team of this game comes in, the Joja Corporation. In Stardew Valley, Joja is a mega corporation that the player used to work for, and there's a local Joja Mart in Pelican Town where the manager Morris wants to take over the community center and make it a Joja warehouse. You, the player, are the last chance Pelican Town has to restore their community center, but you can choose to join Joja and therefore turn it into a warehouse. I think how this would translate into Pokemon could be that Joja wants to buy Stardew Valley and pave Pelican Town and its surrounds to turn it into a big Pokemon League mega city. In order to stop this, the Stardew Valley folks showcase to the player that their Pokemon League is worth keeping around, and the player uses the funds from Grandpa's farm to keep the league going, facing Morris and kicking Joja out of town. And you would do this by facing Morris in a battle. I would say this probably falls between the last gym leader and the Elite Four, as Joja's last stand before packing up and leaving. So what team would Morris have? Well, Morris is a greedy man, so obviously he has a greedent with gluttony. And I think Thievul also fits in this same sort of vibe. He'll also have an Archilodon, representing not only the big city that the player used to work in, but the megacity he wants to turn Pelican Town into. I also wanted something to represent what would happen to the town if Joja takes over, which is obviously pollution and a mountain of trash. So Garbodor is going in Morris's team. And his ace would be a Pokemon that can bring him in a big payday, Persian. So the final Team Joja boss fight is with Morris, with Greedent, Thievul, Archilodon, Garbodor, and Persian. But before you get there to the end of the story, you have to start your story in Stardew Valley, and you do that with your starter Pokemon. Now, I wanted to match existing starter Pokemon to animals or creatures you can own in Stardew Valley, which actually significantly narrowed down my options. When you first create your character, you have the option to pick from 2 different animals for your pet, either a cat or a dog. The only dog starters are Pombon and Fennekin. Pombon's more pet-like, so that'll be our fire-type starter. And the only cat that isn't a fire type is Sprigatito, so there's our grass type. So what about water? Well, there is another pet you can adopt from Marnie's ranch, a turtle. And the only water-type turtle is Squirtle, so Squirtle will round out our starters. Now you have your starter, it's time to move to Stardew Valley and begin your journey. And I can see a clear option for who Stardew Valley's professor would be, which would be the leader of the town, Mayor Lewis. I have some ideas for a team I would give him, but I'll save that for later. So, you have your starter and you've met your professor. So who's your rival? Well, there's no one better than the first person you ever meet when you move into Stardew Valley, Robin. Rival is a strong word here. I can see her being more like newer rivals like Hop or Nimona, someone who is a friend but does push you to get stronger. Robin certainly seems like the type to have a competitive edge to her. Now, as the town's carpenter, the obvious choice for a Pokemon partner is Timber, which would be her ace. And I would also give her the starter Pokemon that has the type advantage over yours. Once again, she seems like she would be competitive. Other Pokemon she would have would be Tinkaton, because Tinkaton's giant hammer would definitely come in handy during construction. Now this next one is a bit of a stretch, but Robin does also sell electronics like TVs, the telephone, and the mini fridge. And, well, 2 of those are forms that Rotom takes, though the only one you can use in a battle is Rotom Frost. Finally, a Mudsdale, as buying the stable from Robin is the only way to get a horse in Stardew Valley. So, rival Robin's final battle team would be the fully evolved starter, Tinkaton, Rotom Frost, Mudsdale, and her ace, Conkeldurr. Now you've picked your starter, you've met the professor, you've faced your rival, and it's time for Stardew Valley to show you what they've got. It's time for you to face the gym leaders. And this took a lot of thinking about. I had to try and narrow down the 30 plus NPCs that Stardew Valley have to 8, and give them all teams that fit a specific type. So I tried my best here. The first gym leader would be Haley. Haley is one of the many marriage candidates and lives with her sister Emily in the south of Pelican Town. And I kind of worked backwards with this gym, because I started with the Pokemon I chose for this gym and then tried to find a villager in Stardew Valley that would fit. Just stay with me. Haley would be a fairy type gym leader, simply because the opportunity to use Alcremie to represent the pink cake in Stardew Valley was too good to ignore. Not only is the pink cake one of Haley's loved gifts, her 14 Heart event is her organizing an event about cake where she brings a pink cake and instructs you to bring a chocolate cake. So, her team would consist of her ace Alcremie, a ruby cream Alcremie with the love sweet to represent the pink cake best visually, and I also gave her a Comfey to round out her team, as 2 of her favorite gifts are sunflowers and daffodils. So I thought a fairy type holding a flower would work nicely. Plus, it could also vaguely represent the bracelet she loses in one of her heart events, as Comfey is holding a vine in the shape of a ring or a lei. Haley's team, therefore, is Comfey and Alcremie. The second gym leader I thought of was Pierre, the proprietor of Pelican Town's general store. Pierre's store is where the player gets the supplies and the seeds to plant and farm from, and Pierre also sells things like fertilizer and soil to help the player along. Given Pierre's stock list, I would make him the grass-type gym leader. His team would consist of 3 Pokemon, based on things Pierre sells at his store. Seedot, to represent all the different seeds you can buy. Cherubi, as cherry saplings are one of the many saplings you can buy. And finally, Roserade, as he sells the bouquet the player uses to propose to their romantic partner. Now for the third gym leader, and I went with everyone's favorite goth girl, Abigail. Abigail is Pierre and Caroline's daughter, and is someone who's a bit into the occult and occasionally mentions that she does some exploring in the mountains, even bringing her sword with her to the beach on Ginger Island to do so. In her 14 Heart event, she also does slay a monster to save your life. All of this originally led me to maybe think she could be the fighting type gym leader, but there weren't a lot of fighting types that I really felt fit her aesthetic or a character, and I'm saving the fighting type for someone later who fits it better. So I went with my next choice. Abigail would be a ghost-type gym leader. The sword she brings to the beach could be a Hone Edge, and in that 14 Heart event, she puts up a memorial shrine to the monster that she slayed, so I also thought of giving her Grievard. Lastly, I think her ace would be Gourgeist. One of her loved gifts is a pumpkin, and Gourgeist is the pumpkin Pokemon. Plus, shiny Gourgeist has long purple hair, just like Abigail. I honestly don't know why more gym leaders and Elite Four members don't have shiny Pokemon. So this makes gym leader Abigail's team a Honedge, Greavard, and her ace, shiny Gourgeist. Remember how I said I was saving the fighting type for later? It's later. And it's Alex. The first thing I thought about when I tried to give Alex a team was, he's a football player. Give him Passimian. It's a perfect fit. As you get to know Alex, he reveals his dream of being a professional grid ball player, which I guess is Stardew Valley's version of football. Plus, his 14 Heart event is setting up a room in the Stardrop Saloon for the guys to go and watch grid ball every Sunday. And Passimian is a Pokemon based on American football or rugby. Look at it, it's perfect for him. But I ran into a bit of a wall when thinking of other Pokemon to give Alex, though I do think I found a good idea. Passimian would obviously be his ace, but he would also get Lucario to represent Dusty, his pet dog. Alex also loves eggs, having special dialogue for the different types of eggs that you can give him as gifts. So he would also get a Combuskin to represent chicken eggs, and a Galarian Farfetch'd for the duck eggs. And I quote, duck egg, rich and creamy, crack, slurp, ah. If I had to read that, so did you. Alex's team, therefore, is Combuskin, Galarian Farfetch'd, Lucario, and his ace, Passimian. Next up, we're taking a trip over to the far west of Stardew Valley and meeting with Wizard. I had two options to give Wizard, Dark or Psychic, and I feel like Psychic works a bit better here. Psychic-type Pokemon tend to lean themselves more towards the magical and mystical compared to the Dark-type. The next step was to give Wizard his Pokemon team. I started by giving him Oranguru, a normal psychic type that lives deep in the forest, much like Wizard lives isolated from everyone else in the Cindersap forest. I also decided to give him Solrock and Lunatone, to represent the Solar Essence and Void Essence you get from slaying monsters, both of which are loved gifts by the Wizard. And I know Lunatone doesn't particularly fit with Void Essence, but Solrock is the perfect representation for Solar Essence that isn't legendary, and Lunatone is its counterpart. Lastly, his ace would be Delphox. Yes, normally gym leaders don't have starters, but Delphox is too perfect to give up. I mean, come on, it's a wizard. It has a magic wand. So Wizard will have Oranguru, Solrock, Lunatone, and Delphox to make up his team. For our 6th gym, I went with someone who is vital to perfecting Stardew Valley, Gunther. Gunther runs the museum, which the player needs to complete the collection of in order to get perfection. You do this by donating artifacts, minerals, gemstones, and fossils. So when I was making this team for Gunther, I decided to go with the rock type, since all the fossil Pokemons, except the ones in Galar, are rock type. But the first member of his team wouldn't be a fossil Pokemon. It would be Carbink, who will represent the gemstones and minerals you donate to Gunther. And there are quite a few fossils that you can donate to Gunther, so I just had to pick 2 out of the many. Omastar will represent the Nautilus fossil, and Credilli will represent the Palm fossil. I could have chosen Kabutops here to represent the Trilobite, but having both Kabutops and Omastar in his team when they're both rock-water type seems like a bit of a waste. For Gunther's ace, I merged the 2 ideas of fossils and gemstones, and felt like Aurorus would fit well. It could represent the dinosaur egg, as well as a number of gemstones like the prismatic shard. And this would make Gunther's full team Carbink, Omastar, Credilli, and his ace, Aurorus. Our 7th gym leader will be living in your rival's house, Robin's daughter Maru. I believe that means this would be the first time your rival canonically has a child in a Pokemon game, correct me if I'm wrong. Maru is a scientist much like her father Demetrius, but she's more specifically an engineer or inventor of some sort. During one of her heart events, she shows you a machine she's working on, the machine backfires and gives you an electric shock. And I think the inventor theme, plus the fact she literally gives you an electric shock, makes for a good reason to give her the electric type. Maru would have a Togedemaru, much like another electric type specialist, Sophocles, who is also an inventor. Plus, I think Maru would like the fact that Togedemaru has her name in it. She would also have other mechanical or inorganic like electric types, namely Electrode, Magnezone, and Rotom. specifically Rotom Heat, which would have the type advantage over her mum Robin's Rotom Frost, and that would be her ace. And last, but certainly not least, and I mean that earnestly, this was the first team of the entire video I thought of, Marnie. And Marnie's last because I do believe that Mayor Lewis would favor Marnie and give her the top spot as the 8th gym leader. For reasons. Marnie runs a ranch just south of the player's farm, and is responsible for the adoption of pets and buying farm animals to live in coops and barns on your farm. And because of this, her team would consist of Pokemon that represent the animals you can buy off of her. Since the starters were the 3 types of pets you can adopt from her, Marnie's gym team would be made up of Pokemon that are the farm animals. Now, there are 7 different types of animals that you can buy from Marnie in Stardew Valley, but as a gym leader, she's only going to have 5. I gave her what I believe to be the most fitting type for regular farm animals, the normal type. This actually rules out 2 of the livestock she sells, as the only chicken or goat Pokemon we have are not normal type. Her team would then consist of the remaining 5 types of animals, a cow, rabbit, duck, sheep, and pig. So I gave her Miltank, Lopunny, Farfetch'd, Dubwool, and her ace Oinkologne. Now onto the Elite Four, and I had an interesting idea. In Stardew Valley, there exists a type of building for your farm called an obelisk. These allow you to teleport to a specific location, depending on which obelisk it is, and having all 4 of them is a requirement for perfection. So it's only fitting that a group of 4 mystical buildings that represent 4 different locations are the basis of our Elite Four. So who are the Elite Four? First, representing the water obelisk, is Willy. He's the town fisherman and runs the boat that takes you to Ginger Island, and is one of only 2 people who live on the beach, the other being Elliot. But Willy is a perfect candidate for the water type. In your very first conversation with Willy, he mentions wanting to keep the spirit of fishing alive, and he runs the fishing store. But there are a lot of fish in Stardew Valley, so which 5 fish do we give Willy? Well, in Stardew Valley, we actually have a specified group of 5 fish that you can only catch 1 of each. These are the legendary fish: Crimson Fish, Angler, Legend, Glacier Fish, and Mutant Carp. So I did my best to match each of these to a Pokemon. Crimson Fish is a fish that lives deep in the ocean, so I went with Relicanth, who, although not crimson, is a rare fish that lives deep in the ocean. Angler was a bit easier to match, as there is a Pokemon that is an anglerfish, Lantern. Glacier Fish was also quite easy, a rare ice-type fish, like one revived from a fossil, Arctovish. The Mutant Carp is a little harder, so I just went on how weird it looks, and Huntail actually looks a lot like the Mutant Carp, so that's Willy's 4th Pokemon. And for Legend, as it only comes out when it's raining, I wanted to have a Pokemon with a rain-based ability that still fits roughly what Legend is. Legend is said to live at the bottom of Mountain Lake. I decided on Whiscash, who lives at the bottom of a swamp or pond, depending on the Pokedex entry, and has the hidden ability Hydration, which heals when it's raining, and that would be his ace. This would just rely on one of his earlier Pokemon setting up the rain for him. Elite for Willy's team, therefore, is Relicanth, Lantern, Arctovish, Huntail, and his ace, Whiscash. The next member of the Stardew Valley Elite Four represents the Earth Obelisk. Someone who lives in the mountains, but specifically in the mines. Yes, the next Elite Four member is Dwarf. Dwarf is someone you can only meet by destroying a rock in the mines that leads to them, and since they live in the mines, which are in a mountain, and it is the Earth Obelisk that sends you there, I had 2 options, rock or ground. And since I've already used rock for Gunther, I gave Dwarf the ground type. I feel like this fits better out of the 2 anyway, since you dig in the mines and the move dig is ground type, as well as moves like Earth Power and Earthquake are ground type, and it is the Earth Obelisk. So the ground type better represents the general vibe of what Dwarf is about and what the mountain is. The first Pokemon I gave Dwarf is Dugtrio. I think this one's obvious. It digs. It's well known for digging. Plus, there is an entire area of Kanto dedicated to its evolutionary line called Diglett Cave, which matches the fact that Dwarf is also in a significant location that is a cave. Next, I gave them 2 ground-type Pokemon that represent the deeper levels of the mines. The icy levels 40 to 79 are represented by Mamoswine, and the deep lava-filled floors below 80 are represented by Camerupt. I also gave Dwarf Gliscor, as a way to match the bats that can be found on most floors of the mines. And lastly, Dwarf's ace would be Golurk. Golurk is said to have been specifically created by an ancient group of people, and some Pokédex entries even mention it could be a machine, which instantly made me think of artifacts like the Dwarf Gadget. It also has a cracked chest which could be made out of clay, which also reminded me of the chipped amphora. Yes, that's a tenuous connection, but it's something. Also, Golurk is based on a golem, so it could be used to represent the stone golems that you can find on some floors of the mines. So Dwarf's team would be Dugtrio, Mamoswine, Camerupt, Gliscor, and Golurk. Our third Elite Four member is representing the Desert Obelisk, and that is Sandy. Like Willy, there aren't that many people that actually live in the desert, and Sandy is definitely the most prominent one. Now, Sandy was a little harder to pin down which type I would give her. My initial gut reaction said to give her the ground type, which would fit with the desert theme, but I couldn't get a lot of ground types that would fit Sandy or the Calico Desert thematically. Then I decided on something, what her ace would be, which I picked due to the coconut trees throughout the Calico Desert, Alolan Exeggutor. I mean, come on, it's a giant coconut tree. But this left me with two choices for her type. Grass, which I already used with Pierre, or Dragon. And when I settled on Dragon, the next step was filling out her team. To choose the next couple of Pokemon, I decided to look into the Skull Caverns, really the focal point of the Calico Desert, and mainly the monsters that reside in the Skull Caverns. I went with ones that best fit into the Dragon type. One, I picked Noibat, as there are two different types of bats in the Skull Cavern, and then I evolved that into Noivern. Next is Goodra, as a nod to the purple slimes that are everywhere within the Skull Caverns. Third, to represent the ridiculously fast serpents, I went with Flygon. And last, for the Pepperex, which are basically dinosaurs, I went with Baxcalibur. I also like the idea that Baxcalibur, especially now Mega Baxcalibur exists, represents a sword, like the fact that you can get the Galaxy Sword only in the desert. So Sandy's team would be Noivern, Goodra, Flygon, Baxcalibur, and her ace, Alolan Exeggutor. Our last Elite Four member represents the last obelisk, the Island Obelisk. And to represent Ginger Island, I went with our favorite bird person, Leo. Okay, yes, Leo isn't a bird himself, but he does consider the parrots that live on the island to be his family. Just let him have this. But the parrots being Leo's family, and the fact he does reference being a bird when you first meet him, pushed me to give Leo the flying type. His ace is obviously going to be a Chatot, as the parrots play a big part in Leo's story and the island itself. He will also have a Tropius, as Ginger Island is the only way to get banana trees in Stardew Valley. I also gave him a Mantine, as the island is the only place you can catch stingrays. Yes, Mantine is a manta ray, but this is close enough. He'll also have Flamigo, which looks really similar visually to the gem birds on the island. And he'll also have a Corviknight. This is because the way that the parrots use the Parrot Express on the island reminds me a lot of the Corviknight taxis. So our little bird boy Leo would have Tropius, Mantine, Flamigo, Corviknight, and Chatot. And now, finally, you've defeated all the gym leaders. You've kicked Joja out of town. You've beaten the Elite Four, and it's time to face the champion. And there's only one person that it could possibly be. Male Lewis. I mean, this seems like the most obvious choice for a champion of the Stardew Valley region. Like with being a professor, being the mayor of Pelican Town translates really well into the role of a champion of a Pokemon League, especially a Pokemon League that has just started. We see something similar in Sun and Moon when you have to battle Professor Kukui as the championship battle in that Pokemon League. His first Pokemon would be Swordsbuck, and it would change form based on the seasons. You see, since Stardew Valley is a farming simulator, the changing of the seasons is a vital aspect of the game. The seasons change every 28 days, and you need to plan which crops you'll plant and when based on this calendar. And as a side note, I do want this game to bring back the season mechanic from Black and White. I love that, and I'm not sure why it hasn't returned. Moving on, I have a fun idea for what else he could use. in Stardew Valley, the town holds a variety of festivals and events throughout the year, and for the most part, Lewis is the one running the event. So I wanted to reflect that in his team by giving him Pokemon that represented some of these festivals, and one from each season. Firstly, to represent spring, Blossom, to represent the flower dance, as it's a dancing grass type with flowers. A Jellicent, to represent the dance of the moonlight jellies that marks the end of summer. A Cacturn, to represent the last night of fall's Spirits Eve festival, as Cacturn is basically a scarecrow. And Delibird, to represent the feast of the winter star, which is basically Stardew Valley's version of Christmas. Lastly, his ace would be something that represents Lewis himself. Something personal, a possession of his that the player can collect that Lewis very much doesn't want the citizens of Stardew Valley to see. Lewis's ace would therefore be his purple shorts. Just kidding, I just had to make that joke. In reality, Lewis's ace would actually be representative of the solid gold Lewis statue, Goldango. Lewis is clearly very rich, as he is the one that buys anything you ship, and he has the prize machine in his house which he has to keep stocked somehow. This prize machine is also stocked with a treasure chest, so having a Pokemon that not only represents something of Lewis's, but represents the wealth that he has amassed just makes sense. So Professor Champion Male Lewis's full team is Swordsbuck, Blossom, Jellicent, Cacturn, Delibird, and Goldango. And congratulations, you're now the champion of the Stardew Valley region. There you have it, all 8 gym leaders, the Elite Four, and champion of a Stardew Valley Pokemon game. What do you think? Not only of the teams I made, but the story and gameplay ideas. I would love to hear your take on the gym leaders and Pokemon League's teams. Maybe you have other suggestions for other villages that should have been involved, or a different team for someone I suggested. Let me know in the comments. This is Ryan from the West. Good night.